Of October the 3rd to order at 5:35. Before we get started, last week we had a few people remote that were not able to get in. I understand what happened, but could I ask the CATV folks, will they see raised hands as well as yourself? Will you see? Okay. If Dave for some reason doesn't notice, could you please call to our attention? Mm-hmm. Okay, and I'll do my best to check. Okay, great, thank you. Okay, first item of business is to address and accept the minutes of September 19th. Can I have a motion to accept them, please?
I'll make that motion to accept the minutes of the September 19th, 2022 meeting as presented.
A second?
I'll second it.
Any discussion?
The only note I'll make is that the executive session minutes are not part of the packet.
The minutes are not, the executive session minutes
Are not included in the packet.
Sorry, Jen, that was my mistake.
So we need to approve those for.
I can tack mine to the October 17th meeting.
Okay. Okay. But it is correct that we went into executive session, we just don't have those minutes.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Any other discussion? All in favor of accepting the September 19th minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Motion approved. We're on to the orders for October 3rd and October 6th. True confessions, we have not had a chance to go through them entirely.
I got a couple of questions.
Please.
Fire them off.
Yeah.
So we should make a motion and then
Oh,
second it
thank you,
and have
Mary.
a discussion.
Make a motion to accept the invoices up to 10/3 and the payroll up to 10/6.
I'll make a motion to accept invoices up to 10/3 and payroll up to 10/6.
Okay, that's what we just signed. Okay.
I'll second it.
A second, okay. Any discussion?
This is probably just a easy question. So highway manager laptop, it's like $4 grand. So, my question is not about the expense, but just whether it might be cheaper to lease equipment like that for 3 years, return it, you don't have to worry about disposal, you get a new one, than it would be to buy it outright.
So there's actually 2 computers there, one for myself and one for Bill.
Okay.
So this one right here, and then for Bill, and sometimes we hold on to them longer than 3 years.
Right.
Sometimes we can't, for budgetary reasons or whatever, sometimes we hold on to them upwards to 5. I'm fairly happy with what we're doing at the moment, and again, Bill's was kind of repackaged and went to Rob. So his was at about the 3-year mark, and we've repurposed it and has gone to Rob, and we hope to get a couple more years out of it with Rob. So gives us flexibility to kind of move them around. We can look into the.
I guess the suggestion is it might not hurt.
Sure, I
So
can
talk
look.
to CCI and just say, what's the benefit of a lease versus a purchase? Because with a lease, you always have up-to-date equipment. And you always get to dispose of the equipment that's.
And did we get them, we have an arrangement with our consulting group for that.
Second question is around the Martin Memorial Building electric bill, which just surprised me because it was higher than my own electric bill. So I don't know if we left the lights on or if we're heating with electricity.
What page are you on?
We're on page, good question. Looks like page 3 to 6.
So,
Towards the
yeah.
top.
So that building doesn't see a lot of use. I mean, it's always possible that a light was left on. Rob's been in there doing some work from time to time. You know, they use it Wednesday mornings, but we generally, other than Rob, we don't go in there. So it's, you know, it's not electric heating to it's oil heat. And, you know, there's nothing that stands out to me that would drive it
There has
up.
been a dehumidifier or
Oh,
something.
okay.
Oh, that uses a lot.
Thank you, Clyde.
Any other questions?
Yeah, unfortunately, I got more. Promise not to use the whole meeting. Let me get the page number for you. Page 4 of 6. Sorry, jump back down. The vendor looks like it's overdrive, and there's a line item for IMLS ARPA grant for almost, well, a little over $1,500. Just curious.
There's a library expense. I think it was for, can't remember exactly what the expense was for, but it came out of the library. Okay, by the Board of Trustees, so you may want to give Nancy a call on anything specific on that.
And then page 5 of 6, the bond payment for 3 Corners. Is that an annual interest payment?
Yep, we have an annual and then we'll have a principal payment in the spring, I think, in May, so correct. Or we'll have a principal and interest, but yes, we have 2 payments of that per year.
Okay. All right, that's it. Thank you.
Great. Clyde, Mary, any questions? Okay, all in favor of the motion that's on the floor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Are there any adjustments to the agenda? Okay, hearing none, let's go. Are there any public comments? On a roll here. Going on to old business, we have a guest with us this evening, and I'll let Dave introduce the topic.
Yeah, so we're back on legal trails, class 4 roads, and the right-of-way policy. I just want to start, after the last meeting, Jim and I, this is Jim Barlow, town attorney, town of Hartland, spoke a little bit about some of the feedback that we received. We went through the right-of-way permit policy, and some of the feedback that we heard was, you know, if you're doing work, kind of had to be a certificate of insurance, it had to be a bond. You know, the rest of the language in that policy gives us enough flexibility to cover what we think needs to be covered. So the rest of the language in that policy basically states that you need to fill out an application, and the town can attach as conditions to the permit, can ask for a certificate of insurance, or can ask for a bond. So there is some flexibility between something as small as, you know, digging a water bar versus somebody coming in with a backhoe and digging a ditch. So there is some flexibility there, we recognize it. And we can take that other language out. The other reason I have brought Jim Barlow in to speak to the board is it became fairly apparent to me last meeting, you know, the town of Hartland has been fairly, loose isn't quite the right word, but with its class 4 and legal trails, we have been very allowed a fair amount of use of those roads. People have built houses, and you know, in the past there's been use of it with really little oversight from the town. The policy comes along and is kind of a contrast to that, and you know, rightfully so, there's some questions back. But over the course of the last 30, 40 years, I think what's been missing in this discussion is an acknowledgement or an understanding by the town of, you know, what these roads mean from a liability perspective, and why we perhaps have brought this language forth to the select board. You know, for a select board to make a decision, you know, based upon, you know, protecting the town and protecting us from liability. I think Jim is the best person to, you know, provide that information. I think he's extremely knowledgeable in this. And I introduce Jim Barlow.
Thanks, Dave. So the way I would frame sort of thinking about town highways is that the town highway system is probably the most valuable asset that the town of Hartland possesses. Between the cost of acquiring the right-of-ways and the cost of constructing the roads that you've got out there, there's probably nothing that even comes close in terms of the value of the asset that's there. You've also probably got more people dedicated to maintaining that asset than any other asset that you got in a town, and that's your road crew. You're probably spending, if you're like any other municipality in the state of Vermont, about 40 to 60% of your entire municipal budget just to maintain this asset, these roads. So this is a big part about what you do as a municipality. It is a big part, and it also brings with it not just a lot of responsibility, but also a lot of potential liability for the town. If you've got 50 miles of town highway, that means you've got 200 miles of boundaries with neighbors on either side, okay? And all of those are potential opportunities for conflict and disagreement and relationships that need to be managed. The town highway system is a place where probably some of the most dangerous activities that people undertake are done, which is to drive motor vehicles. Okay, we engage in that activity, driving cars every day without thinking so much about the risk. But of course, we're all insured to go do it. We have to have, all of us that drive have to have liability insurance. We have to have insurance for our cars. You also, as a town, have to maintain insurance against the liability that you might incur in managing the highway system and operating it. So it's a big asset, it's a valuable asset, it's a complicated asset, and it's an asset with which there is a lot of risk that goes along with it. One of the things that people need to get your permission for is doing any work within the town highway right of way. You control it absolutely. And any work, whether it's regrading, driveways, drainage, putting in pipes, putting in lights, requires a permit from the town. And the reason for that is because of the nature of the control that you need to maintain over this asset. If it were just open to the public to do that which they wished, you would not be able to protect this asset, marshal it, make sure that it's put to the public use, and preserve for public use in the way that it needs to be. So any work within the town highway right-of-way requires a permit from the town. And having a policy in place to sort of standardize that process is something that I recommend to all of my clients, not just Hartland. You really need to have a permit policy that sets out how you will grant permission to use the town highway right-of-way, under what circumstances the town highway right-of-way can be used or worked in. I think, in my opinion, what insurance will be required by those who want to use or maintain or work in the highway right-of-way, and potentially what sort of indemnification they should provide you if you grant them the permission to do it. Okay, because it's part of managing the risks that go along with it. So, I think your policy is a great idea. I think it's definitely in the right direction. I think it covers essentially the issues that need to be covered. In my experience, town highways provide well, a lot of my work, in that there's a lot of difficulties and risks and issues that come out of town highways that need to be managed from a legal perspective and from a risk management perspective as well. So this is just an effort, I think a good effort, to sort of direct and manage that risk in those processes. Yes, ma'am. I agree.
Hi. So I have a question. Could you give us 2 or 3 examples of these problems that you've had to
Oh, sure.
deal with?
Let's see, a town granting permission to an individual to upgrade a town highway right-of-way to use it as a private driveway. Not doing the sort of due diligence to find out what the property owner really wants to do. And the driveway / road being constructed in a way that it's unsafe for public travel and causes a pretty significant erosion and damage to the other sections of the road. Okay? People conducting or placing signs within a town highway right-of-way without a permit from a town that's in a place that's not safe for motor vehicle travel, and potentially could be something that could be struck by a car. And then a project that was undertaken by a private individual to upgrade a town highway, and it was learned that the private individual who was doing the work, or their contractor, was actually working outside of the town highways right-of-way and property that the town didn't control. Okay. So those are the type of situations that come up. And having a process in place where you just, hey, come to us, show us what you want to do, let us review it, make sure that what you're doing is appropriate and in the right place. It's a good way to manage some of those risks.
Are your comments for all classes of highways or specifically related to class 4?
Well, the general comments flow across all the classes of highway. Where a lot of these risks really come to the forefront is that there's oftentimes people want to upgrade class 4 town highways. And that oftentimes can be the area where bigger problems arise.
And how many miles of class 4 highway do we have?
I can't remember.
3?
I was gonna say, I thought of 4 off the top of my head.
Yeah, I
3?
thought it was
That was
close.
4.
Yeah.
So this, for example, Jenny Road, you get about halfway up, it turns from class 3 to class 4.
Yeah.
Right. At that line of demarcation, the town no longer maintains that.
Mm-hmm.
The residents that live there are required to plow the road so they can use it.
Mm-hmm.
So the permit process would require, in a February snowstorm, tree comes down, knocks off the power, 2 feet of snow, would require, on a Saturday, would require a permit to do any of that work.
No, I think that what you'd have before that
Yeah.
is that person or that group of people who's responsible for it. First of all, you're going to want to, you want to know who they are, and so you want to grant them permission to do the private maintenance of that road during the wintertime. And it's going to be broad enough to do the regular sort of maintenance that's required, which is plowing and sanding. And probably to the extent, if a tree falls down during the snowstorm in the winter, call down to the town office, say, hey, a tree fell down, we can't plow, we can't get out, is it okay if we cut the tree?
And the town office is going to have a line staffed 24/7?
No, but when it's available, to the extent, I would think that it would be good if before we just generally let folks go ahead and do these things, they check in with the owner of the road. I mean, certainly it could be an inconvenience, and perhaps it might be something that we do after the fact, but just letting folks know.
There is a provision in there for emergency, I think that the tree, I think what I'm hearing from Jim, I think I agree that for that person that's, there's a winter maintenance permit, so the person's gonna get permission in the fall to do winter maintenance throughout the year.
The resident or the person the resident hires? The resident or the resident's contract?
Depends on who's doing the work. But if, for instance, that road has an extreme washout, and if it's Sergeant's property, or if they run down the road and knock on his door, and he goes up there with an excavator and he fixes it, there's a provision for that emergency work, however, come Monday morning at, 8 o'clock, he's gotta come down and tell us what he's done and, essentially fill out the permit and whatever cleanup work would need to be done after that.
Jim?
Yep.
Just back to your,
if there's any questions, I'm glad to answer them. I think that the policy is a good idea for you. I think it's got the provisions that I would recommend that you have. I think that any policy like this has to be adopted with some flexibility because, emergency situations arise where we can't always follow the policy to the T. But overall, it's a good thing to have.
What about a release of the liability? Rather than have a permitting process, just have the residents sign a release of liability.
The policy provides that by receiving the permit, they agree to indemnify and hold the town harmless from any potential liability.
I'm just trying to think about, minimizing bureaucracy. There's a way to have a resident do something once, right? And acknowledge that, any maintenance that they do, whether it be winter, summer, improvements, they hold the town, rather than have a permitting process.
It would effectively be the same in my mind
You're
because
the same, except it
coming
might be
down.
one time versus multiple times.
I guess you'd want everyone to just release the town from anything. I don't think that would be practically possible.
Why not?
I guess maybe you'd have to describe to me a little bit more what you're
I
contemplating.
think we have a limited number of residents that live on, 3 to 4 miles of class 4 highway. We have a policy already that we don't maintain those roads. So by default, I think you're telling the residents that they need to do their own maintenance. Right? And if that's the case, why not just say, to do your own maintenance, you need to acknowledge in writing that, you're taking on this responsibility to hold the town harmless, and then whatever it is they need to do to maintain their roads going forward, they're able to do it.
If that would be your approach, you could.
So it's a possibility, that's.
Yeah, but I would say that the difficulty in that is that you don't necessarily have the control that you want to have over the work that they might do.
And what control do we want if we're not gonna maintain the roads?
I think it's the scope of work, Jim. If it's a
So-
water ditch and cleaning a water ditch, is that different than, putting in a stone culvert?
Right. I would tend to agree. I think that, part of this is, again, going back to the water bar, I don't think there's an issue. If you're gonna regate a part of the class 4 road, again, I think we want to know that that's what the resident is doing and ultimately the finished product. Part of this permit and policy is that in cases that it is inspected by the highway crew to ensure that the standards are upheld and that we're trying to do. I think that to go back to what Jim is saying, if, we don't know, if we just give them a blanket, you'll indemnify the town, ultimately it still is, kind of a, the Wild West in that someone could be building something that's gonna be detrimental to, what's going on out there.
And doing no maintenance on the roads at all.
Yeah, otherwise I would say let's just throw up the road and let them have it.
But if you do no maintenance on the road, like town's not doing maintenance, if the residents do zero maintenance, you're gonna have a road that doesn't meet standards.
But if they're gonna upgrade it, we wanna know what's going on and have, understand what the standard is gonna be, and whoever's doing that work, again, the excavator doesn't topple over and end up in,
Right.
the next door neighbor's front yard.
Alright, I got my data, I'm good.
I guess I have a question. So, it's the town's road, and just because somebody lives on it, we're gonna likely give them permission to do whatever they want on it, or, I mean, how does that work? Like, what if they want to throw some asphalt down on it?
Well, that would be part of this process, is that they would have to come to the town and say, this is what we are proposing doing on this road, paving it. The select board might say, well, we don't think it's appropriate that you pave this section of Class 4 town highway, and therefore, we're not going to allow that to occur.
So we would have to have some kind of understanding of what we do want on these class 4 roads in order to make that judgment.
Oh, sure.
And I don't think we have that, do we? We don't have maybe a vision of what we want class 4 roads to be. And if we had that vision written down, then we could have something solid to make that judgment when somebody comes to us. Say, no, that's not how we, as a town, envision our class 4 roads to be. Otherwise, you could have somebody look at it and say, sure, yeah, that's fine with me. We can do the
Sure, you can
asphalt.
pave it, go ahead, we don't mind.
Yeah, right.
Sure, or, you know, you can ditch it, or you can stone line ditch it, or pave it, you can do whatever you want. You can widen it from 15 feet to traveled lane to 40 feet, go ahead.
Right. So
Mhm.
I'm thinking that's another discussion maybe we need to have.
Is there not a statement already describing the class 4 roads?
Well, it says what we want, right, we won't maintain them, but I don't know if it goes much further than that.
Are you looking for like a set standard that we're looking to follow? So that way when they come in for a permit,
Yeah.
the permit has to follow the standard, so then it's more of a black and white versus a, discretionary type
Right,
thing.
right.
So we have a set standard for, if anybody needs to upgrade a road, it needs to, one, we have already signed off to the state standards that we need to abide by.
Mhm.
And we got our own set of standards for what upgrading a road would need to look like. I think that the cap to that would be, and this is where the permit comes in as a positive, if someone, as Jim just pointed out, if someone wanted to upgrade it to a class 2 dirt road, or a paved road, the answer to that may very well be, that's not something that we would like to get into. Or if you're gonna get into it and you gotta be knowledgeable enough to do the work.
But what you're talking about is when, let's say, a private road wants to be taken on by the town, they have to move up to certain standards to be a town road.
Yep.
But this is not the same thing.
But we would go by almost the exact same standards, but there's also overlap with the state standards as well. The state standards spell out a lot of the same. It's actually a little bit confusing between the two. But either way, in order to be a town road, we want specific standard. We want the culverts to be a certain size. You gotta have the ditching, you gotta have the stone base, you gotta have the hard pack over it. That's all spelled out, and, this would really be no different. Although we would probably look at it, with skepticism as to where that's gonna go, in the future, and, what it's being used for, and who's doing the work, and, et cetera.
Yeah, I don't think it's an analogous situation actually, but I won't argue that point, except to say that I do think we need a standard. And I don't think what you're describing is an appropriate standard. But anyway,
But it is our road standard and it is the state standard.
for a class 4 road, to bring it up to a certain road base and all that, how is that possible when we're not maintaining it? Anyway, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't see people running out to spend money on class 4 roads, to be honest with you. I think
Well, look what happened at that other problem we had.
That's more of a property dispute versus a maintenance issue.
Yeah, but she had brought it up to quite a standard, so, and maybe we shouldn't have ever let that happen. So, anyway, go ahead.
Rob, you had a question?
Yeah, well, historically, it seems like the policy on class 4 roads is that the town won't maintain them at all. And I think if you define a standard, as Mary was pointing out, for here's what a class 4 road should be, then I think that puts the town in an awkward position of, we're not going to maintain that standard ourselves, but if anybody else wants to work on the road, they have to maintain this hypothetical standard. And so that seems funny to me.
But my point is to lower the standard to a road that's not maintained and not allow it to be upgraded to something closer to a class 3 road. That's my point, is to keep it as close to an unmaintained class 4 road as possible. Whereas you could let people, give them a permit to keep improving it, which is what happened on one, that other road we had a problem with. And then all of a sudden these class 4 roads look more like class 3 roads, and then people are like, hey, we should build houses on them and do whatever. So that's what the point I'm trying to make.
Any reaction, Jim?
And then also what potentially happens is that as the road gets maintained, there's more pressure on the town to reclassify it from 4 to 3 and take over the responsibility for maintaining it.
Yes.
And it's not just class 4, because we have a few legal trails in that same category that are quickly becoming roads.
Yes.
Okay. Jay, you joined us, and obviously the planning commission has written about roads in the town plan. Are any comments at this point you want to share? Or?
We, actually, the planning commission asked me to come tonight, to ask questions, take notes, whatever is appropriate. We haven't seen anything. Have you drafted anything? Do you have a rough draft that you have in mind? Is this just like the opening?
We reviewed what the planning commission had presented to us at the last meeting.
Conservation Commission.
I'm sorry?
Conservation Commission presented.
Oh, did I say planning?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
So I think 2 documents came, had some input from the Conservation Commission, if I remember correctly. In one document that covers the permitting did not. Is that correct?
Right, so the right-of-way permit, that was written by Dave and Jim, I think. And so those pieces were pulled out of the documents that the Conservation Commission put forward.
I don't think that the planning commission is aware of that document. We drafted what we do for the town plan, and now
I
we're
invited
going
him
back
here
and review it.
You did or you did not?
I did, I invited him here tonight specifically for this.
You did?
Yeah.
Yeah, Jay, we reached out.
But has the document been published anywhere?
I haven't passed an eye.
Yeah, I'm only referring to the documents. We've seen no documents.
Okay.
Yes, we were.
Well, I don't want to get off track on here.
Yeah,
but we did try to reach out to make sure that.
Actually, last meeting, Rob said he spoke quite extensively with Jay on the subject,
Yeah, that's what I
prior
thought
to
too.
bringing it forward, actually.
But, okay, but
Yeah,
I want to keep, what's the substance at hand right now?
I would only make one comment, and it goes back to something that Mary said. I mean, really, the difference between a class 3 and a class 4 road, I mean, it's a pretty fundamental difference. That the town You know, can always update a 4 to a 3, but maybe we should just keep the 4 the way that they are, you know? Just, people live on them, they know their limitations. And the limitations should be set forth in a standard, as Mary pointed out.
Sure. Yeah, but I think once people start living on them, then the question of emergency services comes up. So I think we have to hold them off at the beginning.
Yeah, let me just add, I specifically worked on Jim in bringing this to all roads. So it's not just a class 4 issue, it is legal trail, class 4, and class 1, 2, and 3.
Especially right away.
If you are going to be in the right of way, and if you're gonna be working, you need to notify the town and get permission and, you know, provide that data. Again, I'll throw out a couple, you know, out by Herschel's. Rob, actually on your road, we had a contractor doing ditching on the side of your road that Jennifer called me about. We had no idea that they were out there until we got the phone call. We've had some loggers out on the legal trail besides Cream Pot Road. They both did notify us, although we did, you know, ask for, you know, essentially bonding from them in order to ensure that they put the road back in proper order, proper place, so that they didn't leave the marks and the skidder marks. So actually, Mary, I agree with, you know, upgrading and, you know, do we really want that? However, there is pressure on all of these roads, for whatever reason, large and small, to work within the right of way, as Jim pointed out, whether it's a sign, whether it's a logger, or whether a business takes it upon themselves to do ditching on a road. You know, those are things that we want to know and want to, you know, ensure that the town is protected.
If you look at the information that's in your policy and what you would be asking for, pretty simple, straightforward stuff. What are your plans? What are your materials? How much material are you going to use? When are you going to do the work? What's your plan? Then you remind them, you're going to bear all the costs of this. This is on your dime, not the town's, because this is for your primary benefit. You're going to be responsible for all of the signage that might be required for traffic control. Your work safety, so your employees, your contractors, you're responsible for their safety, not us. And for public safety. So, you know, if you got traffic control, you got trees coming down, that's your responsibility, not the town's. Pretty straightforward, standard stuff that you'd expect of anybody doing the work. If you are going to do the work, you're going to hold us harmless, okay, which is the concept of a release here. We're not going to be liable for the work that you do. You're going to be liable because you're the one that's going to control the work site and control the work. So you should hold us harmless and indemnify the town against that, and release us from that, okay? You'll do it to the specifications that we ask you to do it to. So if you're gonna put a culvert in, you're gonna do it to the way that we expect it to be done according to our town specifications, not just the way you think it's good enough. And you'll leave the roadway in as good or better condition that it is right now. So we certainly don't want things to get worse because of the work that you're doing. We may require you to have insurance because this is risky, you know, you're working with excavators, you got boundaries, you got people coming by, there's some risk associated with this. And we may, depending on the nature of the work, require you to post a surety bond to make sure that the work that you're promising that you're going to do actually gets done the way it's supposed to be done, and if not, there's money available to correct those problems, and that's optional. That's not required, but could be required in some cases. You'll notify the town manager before you start the work and notify him when you're done so we can go out and check and make sure everything's been done the way we would expect. So I don't see those as being tremendous difficulty or barriers to overcome for anybody that might want to do work. And again, there's some flexibility built in this so you can administer it, you know, from the mailbox to the reconstruction project or the new culvert that someone wants to put in. And then just going back, with respect to winter maintenance, just get a permit from the town so that we know, you know, who's doing the work. and making sure that, you know, they're qualified to do it, and will do it in a way that's acceptable to the town. I think it's really pretty straightforward stuff as the sort of stewards of these town roads that you should be looking for.
There's a certain amount that's always subjective here. You know, what is the size of the project? And if winter maintenance is, there's one person on the road and that one person's going to do the winter maintenance, is different than a hiring
Absolutely.
a firm.
Yep.
So I do worry a little bit about making sure that we don't fall into a trap of, well, we like Fred, but Susan, you know, did this before, so we won't require her to do anything, but Fred, we are going to sort of. So how do we, are we on our way to craft something that we can sort of have, we need some to be subjective, you know, and, you know, because we never know exactly until the project's described to us. Since this whole discussion is about town liability, how do we sort of handle being lenient and subjective versus opening ourselves up to being liable?
Well, you eliminate unequal treatment by requiring everybody to get a permit, okay? And then you apply subjectivity and reasonableness depending upon what it is that they would like to undertake, considering the circumstances of that road, the project, things along those lines. Not necessarily the individual who is going to be doing it, but the things that they are going to be doing.
Okay.
So everyone who would want to privately maintain a class 4 road in town needs to come down and get a permit to do it.
And say what they're doing.
And say what they're doing, for example.
For each instance.
For each instance.
Each instance of plowing or each instance of maintenance?
Each instance of, I think maybe like each season, okay? Or perhaps however you decide to do it. Once a winter or for as long as they just decide to do it. I don't think it's storm by storm. Right, is that right? It's not like we have to call up and get permission in the town to plow every time it snows.
You know, they bumped into a neighbor clearing weeds on Sunday, just cutting down weeds. And I said, don't cross that line, that's where the class 4 road starts. Do you need a permit for clearing weeds?
Would you as a select board member step in to have to get a permit?
No.
Okay, well, this is ultimately your policy and your decision.
Well, historically, I was thinking about this, that back when Eldon Thompson built his house on Cream Pot Road, it was class 4, and he knew it was class 4. And when he went to sell the house, a lovely real estate agent, well, this is a town road, they maintain it, lack of knowledge, and they ended up suing the town to convert it to class 3 road, bring it back up to standards. And now, instead of one house on one end of Cream Pot, there's umpteen houses on Cream Pot. And something like this would have protected us from having to upgrade it, because when he built the house, he knew it was a class 4 road, with permission to use it, so.
So, I'd like to make a motion.
I don't know.
Pretty easy motion, I heard it.
I'm sorry?
It's an easy motion.
We're having a discussion tonight. I'm not sure what we have in front of us right now. I don't have any of the policies in front of me right
Yeah,
now.
let me make the motion, and you guys decide.
To end discussion, is that it?
No, my motion is simply to take the 3 policies that are under discussion, post the drafts on the town website, send the drafts to the planning commission, and possibly, I'm flexible on this, post the drafts to listserv.
Did
So
we
the
not
public
already
can start
that
to
process?
digest this.
We did reach out. You and I talked about reaching out to the planning commission.
So I reached out and invited them here tonight. I have not sent them a draft, but took this as an invite to have them come and participate in the process.
Yeah, I think that's enough. I mean, we've done our, I'm not sure what you're hoping to gain there.
I think it's due diligence to allow the public to understand the policy or ordinance that we're undertaking before we pass it, right? So I think it's due diligence to post our drafts, let the public digest it, and if there's, public comment that comes out of that, we should hear the public comment.
So you've got a motion on the table, I'll second it. And we can discuss it some more.
Okay, Rob?
So one of the policies we're talking about is this legal trail policy, where we, the Conservation Commission, had recommended prohibiting motorized vehicles. That's a big change, and I don't think that's something that should be undertaken without some public input. I don't know what the best way to get that is, but I think probably for all three of these policies, you want to at least have the public be aware that this is what you're thinking about and give them an opportunity to chime in.
Yeah, I'm in favor, should we enact the policies of notifying the people who live on a legal trail or a class 4 road today. And I would like to think that if we publish this information on the website, that people would come and react to it. But I think we all know at this table, it's due diligence, but it may not gain as much. Jay?
I would, I guess, I'm not gonna take a position on how your motion should be voted on, but I would remind everybody of the Town Highway 8 discussion 2 years ago. And it wasn't, some people on the board tried to frame it as a liability issue for the town, but it's much more, the class 4 roads are much more than a liability issue. It's a public recreation. Public recreation needs public comment. And I think it just makes perfect sense to put it out there, let people discuss it as they did 2 years ago.
Did you want to say something?
I totally agree, and I agree with putting on listserv, because I personally don't go to the town website unless I'm looking specifically for something, but I do see listserv, and there's a lot of other people in town that could say the same thing.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't want to start a listserv debate. We don't do that as a select board. That was done independent by individuals. Possibly putting a notice on the listserv that there's something posted on the website would be, I think, appropriate.
Right, and I wasn't suggesting a debate, but just having the information out there for people to know.
Yeah. Okay, so where are we? Could you repeat what you?
I can try, I'm not sure if I can.
Oh,
I
yeah.
have it, unless
Could
you
you
want to
repeat
make
it
a
for me?
new one. Okay, so, let's see. Okay, Jim made a motion to take the 3 policies that are in discussion and post the drafts on the town website, send the drafts to the planning commission, and possibly, you're flexible on this, to post the drafts to the listserv.
That's an exact read back.
Okay, I will vote against it if I don't want to post to the listserv.
Could you make a friendly amendment?
Yeah, I think I'm
To do the posting to the
Can I ask
website.
a question, just because
Sure.
I know that transparency is super important, and what would be the issue with posting these without any debate on the listserv? I don't use the listserv, I'll be completely honest with you. I get it, and I get like a string of them, and I get them 3 days later, so I don't often follow it.
My phone will start ringing and the listserv will light up with all sorts of opinions.
So what would the difference be between posting a link to the website and posting these actual
I
things?
think it's recognizing that the website is an official vehicle of the town,
Mhm.
It is.
and that if you would like to then make a comment, come to the select board meeting to deliver that comment. I mean, I'm all for a public debate, but
I wouldn't propose the debate aspect of it. I'm more in the thinking just getting it out there so that, you know, I just think transparency is important, and I definitely hear what people are saying where, you know, they don't want it sort of slid in,
I'm
you know,
hearing both
which I don't think
sides of
is
this.
the case.
And here's what I would say. I think the select board, and you guys correct me if I'm misremembering, I think we said we would not communicate via listserv.
Mhm.
The select board would not. So I think that's reasonable.
Yeah.
But any public citizen can put a link to these policies on listserv, and the message will be out.
And we might, yeah.
So let me throw out an alternative here that I think is probably, in my mind, a little bit more official and the way the debate should maybe be framed, is that we make this an agenda for next meeting, and, you know, when I post the agenda, I make an extended announcement that, you know, this is on the agenda, much like the town plan, and that these things that are being discussed are on the town website. And therefore, discussion then, further discussion that should ensues at a public meeting where the debate should occur, and not on the listserv, and therefore I think that might be a good way to kind of thread the needle here.
Except that the agenda doesn't go out till, 5 days before the meeting? And that's often not enough time for people to get together, read it, whatever.
So,
Sooner than that.
understanding what you're saying, when we decide what public meeting we're going to have that discussion, maybe 2 weeks before we ask, or when we put the information on the website, maybe Dave could send out please check the website, there's some new information on this topic. It will be discussed at whatever meeting we think we can fit it in. To counter that, it's the Thursday before the meeting, and
Exactly, because people will want to make plans. They'll need time to make plans if they want to come to the meeting.
Yeah.
So,
I'm comfortable with that. You know,
so we have a motion.
we have a motion.
Oh, and a friendly amendment. Are you going to make the friendly amendment?
I would amend that motion to say the same with the exception of, we'll ask the town manager to make a listserv posting when the information is available on the town website.
I'm challenging you tonight.
Okay.
This is what happens when there's only one agenda item on there. Sorry. Are we comfortable with that?
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's, Cheyenne, one more time, could you,
Do you want just your amendment or the whole?
I guess the amended motion.
Okay, so we're taking out,
Taking out the
Possibly,
possibly
okay.
listserv thing to say the town manager will.
okay, so Jim made a motion to take 3 policies that are in discussion and post the drafts on the town website, send the drafts to the planning commission. And we will ask the town manager to make a listserv posting when the information is available on the town website.
are you comfortable with that?
Kind of lost track, but I think I get the gist of it.
Yeah, I mean, once we have, do we have policies that we're ready to post?
I mean, the drafts exist, we haven't made changes.
Okay. But we were talking earlier this evening about.
So I feel comfortable, based upon the feedback, unless I get a real big no's from you guys, on the language on the right-of-way policy that is specific to legal trails and class 4s as far as an automatic requirement of certificate of insurance and bonding, that language simply be removed because the existing language basically gives us the flexibility to ask that of the applicant, giving us the flexibility of whether it's a water bar or it's a rehab.
Yeah.
So that's what I would then post, and I would keep the legal trail and the class 4
I think
roads
that's fine,
themselves.
yeah, it's still a draft policy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it coincides with what Jim is concurring with Dave. Okay, all in favor of the motion that was just read, please say aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous.
Yeah, I just want to add, it's an interesting little tidbit, but on the right-of-way policy, it's actually not a change of use at all. People still use the class 4 road, people still use the legal trail, people still use class 1, 2, and 3. The difference here is that if an individual is actually going to work on that right-of-way, they need to ask the town. So we're not really changing anything other than you need to come, if you're gonna work on it, ask from the town. I think it's an interesting place where you went. It's almost like by passing this, it's an automatic free card to upgrade to something different. But the reality is, much like what Clyde said, it provides a mechanism to actually control that.
Yeah, that's my hope, yeah.
Okay, Jim, any other comments?
Thank you, Jim.
All set?
Where do you have to travel to?
Peachum.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's,
Most beautiful. I'm sorry.
yes, most beautiful of
Most beautiful town in Vermont, right?
Get off the car and go through yourself.
Well,
Oh, yeah.
my son was just up there for a wedding, and when he left, there was a bear that ran across the road, so be careful.
Yeah.
And you have
There-
some, Jay, I'll get you.
We have lots of them.
Oh, is that
Lots
right?
of them.
And you have some of the best cyclists in the world that are living up there now.
Yes, we do. World class. Yeah.
Jay, you had a comment?
Yeah, just one thing, the planning commission is a little disadvantaged tonight, only because we did not see your drafts, and so we can't even make a comment on it at all. And I think this gets back to the nature of, informing
Did you
people
send
as
your
quickly
stuff
as
out?
possible.
Which, what?
Which door? This way or that way?
Oh, you're
I
paying.
can't remember where I came in.
Okay, the parking is out back. If you parked out back, it's that
Parked
way.
out back.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, folks.
Thank you.
Okay,
Good
good
luck.
night.
Good night. Bye.
So you're right.
Okay, I hear what you're saying, but we didn't attempt to reach out, so did we go to Mr. Jeffries?
We're gonna do it all again.
I'm sorry?
We're gonna do it all again.
Yeah, well, we didn't know you couldn't do it all again either, but that's okay.
I'm
Right here.
finding your statement confusing because
We did discuss a last meeting.
yeah, I don't want to, let's drop it because it just feels, it's like, we're going to be pulling fingers and that's not.
We discussed it.
Productive. Yeah, yeah. Okay, any other
New business?
points?
New business?
Oh, I want to just make sure we
Oh.
close this down. On that part. Okay. We're going on to the new business. Thank you, Jay. Is there any new business?
I did see Ted Cully tonight, and I thanked him for cleaning the statue. He said it took him 3 hours.
I can go to Cleve Henry.
Did you have a permit to work in a public way?
You're saying that's a lot or a little?
I thought it was
I don't think so at all.
you know?
Oh, no.
It was that bad, you think?
Well, if you're doing quality stonework, you can't just throw some lethal chemical on it and
Right.
close it off. It's got to be done.
Yeah. So he did a good job, and I hope that
Excellent.
we remember to thank him in the town report.
We could get him a plaque.
Okay, Dave, you're on with the manager's notes.
Jennyville Road, V-Trans did sign off on the work. That grant reimbursement has been submitted. Hopefully finish that up and be done with it. Clay Hill Road, the reclaiming started on Friday. I believe they continued through till today. It is rough driving if anybody is heading out there. It is down to dirt now from Queechee Road through to Grout. It is graded and fairly compact.
Yeah.
But if they did what I think they were supposed to do today, it should be dirt from Queechee to Grout. We're going to continue to do some ditching and guardrail removal in that area, and around October 14th, they should be rolling in to do the paving on that.
So there is a lot of guardrail, which is actually even hard to see. Is it all the guardrail that's being done, or just up by the turn?
When you say by the turn, so I think the straightaway there before you get to Matt Dunn's has got some stuff there.
Right.
I think some of that old stuff, most of it's going to be yanked out.
Yeah, because yeah, okay, great.
We had grading on our road today, and they did a really nice job. They did a good job. And there was a truck following him beeping. He wanted to get by him. And the guy in the grader couldn't hear him, I'm sure. There was no way to get around it. Anyway,
Yes, the life in a grader.
yeah.
That's right.
Rains recently, last 3-4 weeks even, we've had quite a bit of rain. Seems like we're making up for it for what we didn't get June and July and August, or at least the beginning part of August is now coming at us, a little bit like last year. It is causing problems. Cream Pot Road, Town Farm Hill Road got hit pretty hard. So we are getting some phone calls, and Doug, our grader, is out this week. We've got a stand-in there doing weeds, so it's good to hear that it came out well. But we will continue to look or continue the grading operations through October. As you know, the auditor will be with us next meeting, so we'll have a pretty good meeting next week, or on the 17th. We are now down to less than $25,000 in delinquent taxes.
Just that on the audit reports.
Yep.
So this may be just a learning opportunity for me.
Yep.
What oversight does the treasurer have, or what input do they have in this process?
So, actually fairly little. So the treasurer is responsible for the accounts themselves. So, Cheryl's responsible for ensuring that what money is in Mascoma Bank matches what we've got. The town manager is responsible for accounting of the departments and basically the town. So Martin is delegated to do that work, and Martin and the auditor work hand in hand. She is essentially there to make sure that the financial statements are stated correctly, which is an accounting practice. So to make sure that those are stated correctly is on us, and so we work with the auditor to ensure that she basically ensures that they're stated correctly. And
So when I look at some of the VLCT documentation, so I'm always trying to read and learn a little bit more. It references, I think it's in state statute, but the treasurer should be doing a quarterly report to the select board.
so you get one monthly?
Yeah.
You get a monthly report. I don't know, that's certainly better than quarterly. Comes from the finance person. If you want her to tell you how much money is in Mascoma to match with that, that's fine. For instance, your particular interest, which is the various funds, that money is just, for lack of a better term, commingled into the accounts. So we do the accounting, which is going to, tell you, okay, out of that $3.5 million in the 3 accounts that we have, those 15 accounts, you've got this, and this. So she can give you the ballpark figure, but we sit down and we're going to tell you how much is in those particular accounts.
Right, you don't have a separate bank account for each fund.
Nope.
It's just cool.
So we also don't sit here and do it monthly or quarterly because, to be honest with you, Jim, they don't change hardly at all. And when they do, we usually go to town meeting to do that. Or, like when we bring John Leonard in, we tell you or we telegraph what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So, seldom, the accounts that money did move in and out of on a fairly regular basis weren't even our accounts. They were the Hartland Volunteer Fire Department, they were the Hartland Winter Trails that we were essentially a fiduciary over. Money moved in and out of those accounts, but they were, at the end of the day, the responsibility the responsibility of us, because Martin at the time was working, doing their accounting, but it was their budget, and we've worked over the last 5 years to pull that out of our budgeting and to have that their own, because they are their own 501c3, shouldn't be in with us. So now that we've taken those out, there's very little movement, with a caveat. Nancy moves quite a bit of money in and out of her accounts. She's got, a fundraising account that she takes money out of fairly often. And maybe 2 or 3 other accounts that she kind of moves money around, but, you got it in the audit, we put it in, the town report is essentially based off of a lot of the financial information that we've just done, because that's at the end of fiscal year 22. We moved money with John Leonard from one account to the other.
Yeah, what do other towns do? Do they generally get updates from their treasurer on a quarterly basis?
At tops, maybe once a year. Again, the treasurer has a statutory duty to look after the accounts. Okay? So she goes through the accounts, she looks at deposits and withdrawals, and she ensures that the money that's in those accounts are sound and match the accounting that we have done. And Martin and Cheryl do that monthly. She can, at her own will, take that money out of Mascoma and stick it any place she wants. That could be, the bank over in Woodstock. It used to be in a bank in, I forget the bank it was in. And Deb Olmsted, as treasurer, pulled it out of that bank and brought it over to Mascoma. And presently, we've got a bank that allows us to be insured and to carry the amount of money that we've got in the 2 accounts. So, that's the role of the statutory treasurer. It's also very, very difficult to find a elected treasurer to do the accounting of the town and to do it correctly, which is why we did bring in Martin 5 years ago. Prior to that, Carolyn was an elected treasurer, and she did a fine job doing the accounting. It was a rough transition, when she had to leave us. But what we have set up right now is statutorily correct.
Yeah. Thank you.
And it is complimentary that there are no audit findings there haven't been any for the 4 years that I've been here, so.
In the other, when we kind of moved in this direction, there is a natural checks and balances with Cheryl and Martin, in that she does go through the reconciliation. Her and Martin sit down and make sure that reconciles. So you have 2 sets of eyes on it, so that whatever Martin's got does match up with Cheryl on a month-to-month basis. Prior with Carolyn, that didn't exist. It was just Carolyn. Although, again, once a year, an outside auditor, outside firm comes in and ensures that, again, it's properly presented, financial statements, and so you've got a fair amount of overlap between the 3.
Okay.
Sean McGranigan, very sorry to say that he is leaving us after a year. Gonna miss him. Thought he was off and doing some good work. We were starting to make a little bit of a dent on some of the enforcement with the junkyards. Also with the 911, Stacy is the deputy 911 coordinator, so I'll work with her as to how we proceed on Route 12. And we've already had that discussion, and she'll start that discussion with the state of Vermont, and we'll kind of trudge our way forward. I will work to put that back out to advertise. Kind of hesitated for a few days just as to, you know, whether I all worked or whether I want to add or subtract any of the responsibilities, you know, other than those core, you know, building permits and enforcements. You know, he had started to work on stuff with the planning commission and perhaps some grants and stuff like that. So I just need to need to toss that around a little bit before I put that back out.
Okay, is there a place to run those ads? Is there a planning commission, national organization, or besides VLCT, is there anything?
Yeah, there's actually a Northeast Regional, and I think a state of Vermont. I think this one I put it on the Northeast Regional Planning website. Actually, that he saw, and we got his application through that.
Okay.
I can't remember what it is. I'll have to revisit it and go from there.
I've got a question. Exit interviews, do you,
We had a pizza and a couple of beers at
someplace, so you do conduct an exit interview with everybody?
Generally not. You know, I've only had, you know, other than the people underneath me, you know, for instance, somebody underneath Bill, has left, and, you know, I've had some general conversation as to, you know, they came in and, you know, why they were leaving. I wouldn't call it an exit interview. But when Bill left us and came back in the fall, I had some personal time with Bill. It wasn't formal again. That was over beer and some burgers. This one was over pizza and some beer at, over in Hanover at Brick and Brew. But, you know, I generally have a pretty good conversation and understanding as to why they
So,
left.
do other department heads conduct exit interviews? So does John, like when Jenna left, did he conduct one?
No.
That's something that we should consider encouraging.
Yeah, sorry to see him go.
Yes, me too,
Yeah.
very much.
That's it? That's all I got.
Active 50, okay.
Oh, no, wait, hold it. Got two more things. Signage at Sumner's Falls and Katy Brook Trail are up. We had to move a couple over on Katy Brook Trail. There was a little pushback from Mr. Donahue. They were a little too close to his driveway. I think we've got alleviated, but we'll see. And just a reminder, Board of Abatement. Select Board is a member of the Board of Abatement.
Got an earful this
And,
today. I was not doing that.
Barely had a quorum at the last meeting.
I was in surgery.
I told them I wasn't going to make it.
I was told that they didn't need a quorum, which I thought was good information, and
It was.
well,
Okay, we're all duly guilty, right?
yes, and we'll all try to.
Some more guilty than others.
Okay.
Thanks, Jim.
Okay,
That's it.
any correspondence?
None.
Okay, that is it. We have an executive session.
I might say one thing about the Jenny Hill Road deal. The last ditching you did right by Richard Belial's, if you meet a car right on the crest of that hill, that last ditch tries to pull you off.
Going towards Brownsville Road is Belial, the last house
Yeah.
on the right
Yeah.
there.
And that thing that ducks off to the right there,
Yeah,
and it will pull you down if you try to meet another car right in that location, otherwise they can put up
It's kind of shallow to start, it's right, it doesn't take up his whole yard, it's kind of about two-thirds.
This is down right at the crest of the hill.
Is it a snout that goes off, or is
Yeah,
it
it's
just
cut. it's
Ultimately, it does.
Yeah.
That wasn't there originally, the state has put that in as part of the
Yeah,
exit interview. I think that what they try to do is actually make that fairly unobtrusive, which may be a little bit of why that kind of pulls, it's really, they really tried to make that fairly shallow in that area, that's all I can say.
Why don't we make that motion, go into executive session and take a break?
Okay, I make a motion that we move to executive session pursuant to 1 V.S.